Most people fall in love before they are capable of loving, and the tragedy is that it feels convincing precisely because the self has not yet formed. In psychological immaturity, love does not emerge from fullness but from absence. The individual has not yet completed the task of individuation, so the relationship becomes a substitute identity. Desire carries urgency because it is trying to stabilize a fragmented inner world. What feels like devotion is often a plea to be completed, and what feels like passion is frequently the nervous system reacting to familiarity disguised as fate. Jung observed that when the shadow remains unconscious, it does not disappear, it attaches. Early love becomes the stage upon which unowned traits, unmet needs, and unresolved wounds are projected onto another person and mistaken for connection. This is why immature love confuses intensity with intimacy. Intensity comes easily when two unfinished selves collide. There is volatility because there are no internal boundaries yet. Attraction is amplified by fantasy, by the anima or animus still inflated with idealization. The beloved is not seen as they are, but as the carrier of everything missing inside. The bond feels urgent because it is unstable. It must be constantly affirmed, proven, performed. What is called romance is often trauma repetition dressed in poetry. And this is where the listener must be confronted. If early love once felt overwhelming, consuming, or dramatic, it was not because it was deeper, it was because it was compensatory. The self was still under construction, and love was recruited to do the work that solitude, reflection, and psychological integration had not yet done. The pain that followed was not bad luck, it was the inevitable collapse of projection. When fantasy can no longer be maintained, disappointment arrives, not as punishment, but as correction. Loss, withdrawal, and disillusionment are not detours, they are initiations. When the relationship fails, the psyche is forced back onto itself. The individual begins, often unwillingly, to encounter the shadow they once outsourced. This is where the romantic narrative fractures. Love no longer promises rescue, it exposes dependency. And in that exposure, something essential begins to form. People who eventually reach their psychological prime do not arrive there through optimism. They arrive through the slow erosion of illusion, through learning that intensity without containment becomes chaos, through discovering that unregulated emotion is not depth, but immaturity. The self that emerges afterward is quieter, less reactive, and no longer desperate to merge. From here, love begins to change, not because age has advanced, but because the self has finally taken shape.
What collapses after immature love is not hope, but fantasy. When projection fails, the psyche withdraws its misplaced meaning and forces a reckoning. The individual who survives this phase does not become colder, they become clearer. Jung understood this as the beginning of true individuation, the moment when the psyche stops searching outward for what must be integrated inward. Love is no longer asked to stabilize identity, it is relieved of that burden. In this middle passage of psychological development, solitude becomes unavoidable. Not the romantic solitude of longing, but the sobering kind that exposes inner contradictions. The shadow is no longer safely hidden inside another person's flaws. It emerges as one's own impatience, avoidance, hunger for validation, and fear of abandonment. This is where most people retreat back into familiar patterns, repeating earlier attachments with new faces. Trauma repetition offers intensity without growth, and it feels safer than facing the self unmediated. But those who continue inward begin to change their relationship to desire. They notice how urgency fades when the inner world stabilizes. They stop mistaking anxiety for attraction. The anima or animus, once inflated with ideals, loses its mythic glow and becomes human. This is not disillusionment in the bitter sense, it is perception sharpening. The beloved is no longer a symbol meant to redeem the past. They are simply another psyche, separate, limited, and real. This is where the listener may recognize an uncomfortable truth. If love once felt like survival, it was because the self had not yet learned to contain emotion. The earlier need to chase, prove, or secure affection was not devotion, it was dysregulation. Psychological prime begins when emotional restraint appears, not as suppression, but as regulation. Stoic restraint, in this sense, is not emotional distance, it is the ability to experience feeling without being possessed by it. From this position, love slows. Choice replaces compulsion. Attraction becomes selective because the psyche is no longer hungry. There is less tolerance for chaos, not because passion is feared, but because instability is no longer exciting. The nervous system no longer interprets unpredictability as chemistry. Calm does not feel boring, it feels safe. People in their prime love differently because they no longer use love to negotiate their worth. Boundaries appear naturally, without theatrics. Silence is no longer threatening. Presence replaces performance. There is space for the other person to exist without being tasked with filling an internal void. This kind of love feels less dramatic because it is no longer trying to heal the past. It is grounded in the present self, not the unfinished one. And once the self is formed, love is no longer urgent, it is intentional. By the time psychological prime is reached, love is no longer confused with longing. The individuated person does not approach connection as a solution to inner tension. That tension has already been metabolized. What remains is not hunger, but capacity. Jungian maturity alters the entire orientation toward attachment because the psyche is no longer split against itself. When the shadow has been integrated, there is no unconscious material demanding enactment through another person. This is why people in their prime do not chase. Chasing belongs to the unfinished self, the one still attempting to secure coherence through external affirmation. In immature love, pursuit is mistaken for desire. In prime love, desire exists without pursuit because it is not driven by fear of loss. The individuated psyche understands that connection chosen freely is stronger than connection secured through anxiety. The listener may recognize that earlier relationships required constant emotional labor. There was a need to manage moods, decode signals, anticipate abandonment. That labor felt like intimacy, but it was vigilance. Love expressed before psychological readiness often feels intense because it is unsafe. The nervous system stays activated, mistaking arousal for closeness. What was called passion was often the body bracing for instability. In contrast, love formed in psychological prime feels contained. Emotional expression is measured, not because feeling is diminished, but because it is integrated. Stoic restraint appears here as an inner governor, allowing affection without collapse. There is room for disagreement without threat, distance without panic, silence without meaning-making. The relationship does not have to be constantly reinforced because it is not holding the self together. Anima and animus maturity further alters attraction. The beloved is no longer idealized as an answer to an unconscious image. Fantasy dissolves, and with it, disappointment. What remains is appreciation without illusion. This is why prime love appears less intoxicating from the outside. It does not intoxicate, it stabilizes. The individuated person also recognizes timing in a way the immature self cannot. Love is no longer pursued simply because it is available. Selectivity is not arrogance, it is alignment. When the self is known, incompatibility is felt early and accepted without dramatization. There is no need to force resonance. Absence is tolerated because it is not experienced as rejection. This is the quiet shift most people only recognize in retrospect. The best love does not announce itself with urgency. It arrives without demand, without fantasy, without the promise of rescue. It feels calmer because nothing inside is still fighting for completion.
By the time love appears in one's psychological prime, it is no longer confused with destiny. It is recognized as choice. The individuated person does not interpret attraction as a command from the unconscious, but as information. There is no compulsion to act immediately, no fear that delay will cause loss. Timing is no longer external, it is internal, governed by readiness rather than hope. This is why love in its mature form often arrives after disappointment, not optimism. The earlier self believed love would redeem what life had not yet resolved. The later self understands that love cannot substitute for a formed identity. What once felt like magic is now recognized as projection. What once felt unbearable is now endured without collapse. The psyche has learned that intensity is not proof and suffering is not depth. To the listener, this may sound like something essential has been lost, but nothing vital disappears. What dies is illusion. Prime love does not burn because it does not need to consume. It does not escalate because it is not compensating. It does not promise transformation because transformation has already occurred elsewhere. The relationship is no longer the site of individuation, it is the result of it. This is where emotional containment becomes visible. Feelings are allowed without being weaponized. Conflict does not threaten identity. Distance does not provoke panic. The other person is not responsible for regulating what has already been integrated. This creates a paradox that unsettles those still attached to early romantic narratives. The safest love is also the least traumatic. People in their prime do not love less. They love without fantasy. They do not need to be needed. They do not seek intensity as proof of connection. They recognize that what once felt alive was often just unresolved. Choice replaces compulsion. Presence replaces imagination. Reality replaces longing. The psychological advantage is not happiness, it is stability, not permanence, but resilience. Love is no longer asked to carry what the self can now hold. It becomes quieter, slower, and more selective because it is no longer fighting the past. This truth is rarely taught because it cannot be sold early. It only becomes visible after the collapse of immature love, after projection has failed, after the self has been forced into form. By then, the lesson is no longer exciting, it is simply clear. The best love does not arrive early. It arrives when nothing inside you is still asking to be saved. True love is not found in urgency or fantasy, but in the calm clarity of a formed self. Understand your patterns, embrace your growth, and witness the power of prime love. If this revelation resonated, like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more deep psychological insights. Your journey toward authentic connection starts with awareness. Take the step today.